On 60 Minutes, welcome to Dubai.
If you're in the international drug business, Dubai is a great place to do business from.
The new crime capital of Australia.
Public enemy number one sorts of criminals can operate with impunity and keep their businesses going.
Why our worst crooks and suspected crims.
They are people with a lot of influence, a lot of money.
Love this glitzy gangster's paradise.
The baddest of the bad.
The baddest of the bad.
Hello and welcome to the 60 Minutes podcast, Extra Minutes. I'm Amelia Adams and I'm here with my colleague from 60 Minutes and Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, Nick McKenzie. Welcome.
Good to be here.
If anyone's missed Nick's story, you can watch that on 9 Now and on YouTube. And it's centred around Dubai, which most of us know as a popular holiday and tourist and business destination, but it's become a bit of a haven for something else.
Well, the largest leak of property data in Dubai has occurred. A group of journalists from around the world have accessed this huge trove of information about who owns what in Dubai. And what it's told us and told the world is the shadiest people, warlords, corrupt political figures, and in Australia's case, our biggest organised crime bosses have moved to Dubai, are investing there, and in the case of these Aussie gangsters, are operating their businesses there.
So talk me through some of these gangsters. Who are we talking? What sort of level of bad, and what are some of the things they've been involved in or suspected of being involved in?
The Australian Criminal Intelligence Commission, so Australia's peak intelligence organised crime agency, has a list of basically the top 20. Think of it as the FBI's most wanted.
Okay.
The top 20 drug traffickers posing a grave threat to national security in Australia. From that list, sort of the top 10 are in Dubai or have been in Dubai. Mm-hmm. So that tells you that the worst of the worst, those involved in the most serious levels of organised crime harming Australia, while they are Australian, are in fact based mostly in Dubai, sometimes in Turkey and Lebanon, but moving their organised crime offshore, where their hope is they're out of sight, out of mind. Mm. And now what this property leak is, the reason it's so important is it puts them front of mind.
Yeah.
It shows the world they're there. It shows the Australian government they're there.
Yeah.
And it puts a huge amount of pressure on the UAE to clean up its act.
And just in terms of the property, what are we talking? Because some of the images in your story are just like stunning luxury high-rises. I mean, it's a very glitzy place. There's a lot of cash, right?
Well, think of Angelo Pandelli. He's the most senior Hells Angel in Australia. Now, he's in Dubai, or at least flits from Dubai to a couple of other locations. His property's worth US $10 million.
Wow.
And we went and checked it out. It's in a guarded frond, one of these extraordinary man-made structures in Dubai. And it's under renovation. So let's say it's just pouring another few $1 million into it. But I think it's what we expect. We expect our organised crime figures to be living these glitzy lives.
Yep.
They can't live them. Well, it's much harder to live them in Australia because no police can follow them, tap their phones, interrogate their co-accused, etc. In Dubai, there's a level of impunity.
And why is that? Why is Dubai easy? Why has it become a safe haven for them?
Well, that's a very good question that sort of underpins this huge leak. The Dubai authorities, for many years, the UAE authorities have welcomed capital. They wanted the economy to boom. They wanted the real estate market to boom. So there's been an unofficial policy of ask no questions. As long as you bring cash in, it's okay. They have systems of informal money transfer. It's called the Hawala network, where you can move money from, say, Australia to Dubai without triggering any anti-money laundering alarm.
Right.
Huge amounts of cash. You can bring cash in. So it's easy for criminals to move their ill-gotten gains to Dubai.
Yeah.
And at least until relatively recently, the Dubai authorities didn't mind, as long as you weren't drug trafficking in Dubai. If you were drug trafficking in Australia from Dubai, that's okay.
Not their problem.
Precisely.
So they're essentially over there turning a blind eye.
Well, they say they're cracking down. The Australian authorities have done a good job at times at working with the Dubai authorities to arrest some Australians, to have them extradited. But ultimately, it still seems to be a safe haven for some very serious Australian organised crime figures. Now, why do we care? They're visiting huge harm in Australia and elsewhere across the world. These guys are not just trafficking drugs to Australia. These drugs are moving all over the world.
I think that's an important point, because a lot of people would watch your story and it's a fascinating story, but say, well, you know, they've got all this cash, big Aussie gangsters, they've moved to Dubai, they've got a nice house, why do I care? Why does it affect me?
Yeah, well, it affects us all in Australia because the organised crime they're engaged in is actually impacting here. The drugs are being imported here. The money is being laundered here. The corresponding corruption risks, health risks, economic risks. Think about the impact on the cost of housing in Australia. Think about those corrupt government officials, those corrupt officials who work at our airports, at our ports, who are getting corrupted by this dirty money. Think about the health impact when people have problems with drugs, they end up in our hospital system. That's a huge impact in Australia. This story, though, is not just about a problem in Dubai. Basically, we can say with confidence the Dubai authorities have, to some extent, turned a blind eye to organised crime and money laundering fact. But Australia isn't doing enough here to fight organised crime. The money ending up in Dubai is being earned from drug trafficking in Australia.
Yeah.
So this also casts a light on a pretty significant failure of government agencies or the federal government here in this country.
The property leak, no doubt, will have raised eyebrows here. I mean, what more could authorities be doing? Why is it so hard for them to, track that money?
Well, it's raised eyebrows all around the world. There's been 75 different investigative journalist outfits who've published, from Le Monde to the Times of London to the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age. So a huge amount of pressure on the UAE authorities to clean up their act. Here, though, it's clear, at least in my mind, organised crime is not a political priority in Australia. We need the federal government, we need state governments to take it seriously because it's having an impact. Whatever your view on the war on drugs, drug prohibition, whether that policy is failing or not, and that's a debate that should be being had. Whatever your view on that, one thing is clear, is organised crime does cause corruption. It does undermine our society. It does have huge economic impacts. It does have huge health impacts. And this is why government, state and federal need to do more.
What's the UAE had to say about all this? Because this is, as you say, shone an enormous and pretty nasty spotlight on them.
It's hugely embarrassing for the Emiratis. They have said that they are cleaning up their act. They note the fact that they've recently removed off a sort of dodgy country list that's maintained by the anti-money laundering global regulator, and they say that shows they're improving. The world's actually looking to the UAE as well to perhaps rebuild Gaza when the war is over. So in some respects, I think the UAE is hoping that they'll get a bit of a free pass because we need their money to flow into Gaza when the time's right. And the UAE plays an important strategic role in many ways. But ultimately, all these headlines and all these publications around the world are saying one thing, which is that Dubai is a safe haven for corruption, organised crime, the worst of the worst around the world. And that's got to force that government, at least to some extent, to clean up.
To have a look. It's in such an interesting and critical position, isn't it? I mean, geographically, but also, therefore, as you say, geopolitically.
That's right. I mean, ultimately, I think the Dubai or the UAE authorities know that the West is, and Europe needs the UAE to perform certain functions. And they're hoping that reliance on the UAE will safeguard it from further sanctions. The European Parliament has been pressuring Dubai to clean up its act because the European Parliament knows that where there is corruption throughout Europe, drug trafficking throughout Europe, serious organised crime, lots of that money is ending up in Dubai.
That's right.
Lots of the players are ending up in Dubai, and that's fueling those problems. So Dubai is feeling, the UAE is feeling that pressure. But will it change its act? At the end of the day as well, it wants capital to flow in. It's a financial hub, tax-free zones everywhere. There are incentives for it to keep everything the same. There are also, now I think, hopefully greater pressure for there to be change.
Just in terms of some of the Australians and the Aussie cartel featured in your story, I mean, what does the Aussie cartel do? How much sort of money are we talking? How big is that operation?
The world is used to hearing about massive Mexican cartels, South American cartels. In fact, the term cartel, I think, for the average Westerner springs to mind, Mexico. 2 years ago, Australian agency said, no, we have our own cartels that are comparable to your Pablo Escobars of old and the very serious Mexican cartels of today. And they called the main cartel the Aussie cartel. It's perhaps a cheap tag, but it's easy to understand. It comprises of Hells Angels, the Comancheros, so the two major outlaw motorcycle gangs, along with some significant Middle Eastern organised crime figures and some other significant players, all Aussie players. Now, these people work together to traffic drugs. They traffic an estimated $1.5 billion worth of drugs.
It's a lot of money.
It's a huge figure. Now, they're doing that because they have corrupt networks in Australian law enforcement. They've got corrupt networks in Australian ports and airports. They have connections to the cartels in Mexico and South America. They've got great connections in the Golden Triangle where there's meth laboratories being made. They've got great connections in southern China where a significant amount of drugs chemical precursors are produced. They're operating. The Aussie cartel is effectively a multinational, multi-billion-dollar business run by gangsters who are Australian, and many of them aren't getting away with it. There has been some significant success. 3 or 4 key figures are locked up, are facing charges. But it must also be said, you take out one Aussie cartel boss,
another one jumps in.
Quickly.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Some of the baddies, if you like, featured in your story, you mentioned Angelo Pandelli. I mean, are these men who have spent, all these millions of dollars on these luxury Dubai properties revealed in this leak, are they currently accused of anything or charged with anything, or these are sort of their known past and what they're suspected of doing, but our authorities can't get to them?
Well, so Angelo Pandelli is a case in point. He's been designated by Australian agencies as a priority target. So he's one of the top 10 alleged organised crime bosses harming Australia offshore. There's a great sort of part to this Dubai story which is worth explaining. There's one tower of apartments.
Yes.
It's called Sunrise Bay Tower Number 1. Now, in those apartments, you had Mark Buddle, the international commander of the Comancheros on level 14 or whatever. I think he owned 3 or 4 apartments.
Yeah.
You had another key player, alleged key player in the Aussie cartel. He owned a title deeds in that apartment. You had 2 other key narco players in the Australian organised crime scene on different floors. One had 2 apartments, one had 1 apartment, and a couple of other key. So one apartment block
with all these key players,
5 or so of the most significant alleged organised crime drug importers, who are responsible, we say, for more illicit drugs entering Australia than at any other time in recent history in one apartment tower. Think about that.
Kind of conjures up images of these like big parties and smoking cigars, and you can only imagine.
We adapted the Melrose Place at International Drug Trafficking, and it's a catchy line, but there's a truth to it.
Yeah.
But once again, I mean, we can get obsessed with the idea of, or people like to perhaps have a peek at the great wealth these guys are flashing around.
Yeah.
They are in many ways caricatures of gangsters, but ultimately, you've also got to focus on the harm they're causing and really take a good, hard look at that. They are hurting Australia.
Yep.
And some of them are operating with relative impunity, and that should concern us all.
And there's nothing really to stop them in Dubai. I mean, there was a really fascinating part of your story, I thought, where there was a TV sting, hidden camera, as the reporter went essentially luxury real estate shopping. And you could hear the real estate agents. They don't care who's buying. They don't care how they're buying. They just want the money.
Well, in fact, the real estate agent was marketing Dubai as a place you could come up with a bag of cash, or crypto in this case, and dump it on the table and walk away with the deed to a $5 million villa.
So they're proud of that.
What does it tell us? It tells us the real estate sector there is built on receiving cash, no questions asked.
Yeah.
That's the selling point. Now, that's happening the very same time the UAE authorities are saying, no, we're cleaning up our act. So, I think much of that luxury and high-end property in Dubai, a good chunk of it has been bought with money plundered from, say, the people of Iraq by corrupt officials, the people of Afghanistan, the people of Pakistan. We've seen politically connected leaders there, generals there with assets in Dubai, and then organised crime bosses from across Europe and Australia. That's dirty money flowing in there. And that's why the property market there is so hot.
Just finally, you mentioned there's not enough of a conversation going on here with the federal government. What are you hearing in terms of reaction to this, response to this, what might be done, what should be done? Because, as you say, it is affecting everyday Australians.
Listen, we hear crickets basically. 30 years ago in Australia, when organised crime became a major front page issue and a political priority, we had royal commissions to examine who were these men running crime empires in Australia, corrupting police, evading taxes, spreading drugs, spreading violence, spreading crime. And there was a significant response by the governments of the day, state and federal back in the day. Now, the consistent message I hear from senior law enforcement officials is state and federal governments do not care. Drug use has been normalised in this country. The ills of organised crime aren't seen to be at least affecting people in a tangible or politically important way, so there's no corresponding political action.
Isn't that sad?
It's terrible. It's terrible. So I think ultimately we need a more honest debate about organised crime, about the drug trade, about our policy of drug prohibition. Whatever way you think about it, it should be talked about. And that, the responsibility ultimately lies with, right now, the Albanese government.
Yep.
You don't hear them ever talking about organised crime.
Well, thank you for explaining it all so well. It's a really important global investigation. Great to see it splashed across the SMH and the H. And for anyone who missed Nick's story, you can catch up on 9 Now and on YouTube. And we'll see you on the next episode of Extra Minutes.